It's been a while since a promising new military-based mecha anime has graced our seasonal watch list. I mean, you could technically consider Attack on Titan one, but that's not really very new. So for me, the last promising new entry into the genre was all the way back when Iron-Blooded Orphans was released. This was one of the few anime actually capable of filling the void left behind by my favorite series, Code Geass. The way those two series were able to build such an immersive world of conflict is something that not too many recent anime have been doing as of late. There really just hasn't been a lot of them in this era of isekai and fantasy. So when I saw that the light novel 86 was getting its own adaptation this season, it made me think that perhaps we might actually get a decent war drama with lots of mechs and politics. One that follows in the footsteps of Code Geass and Attack on Titan and uses the heavier themes of discrimination and racism as these central plot elements. Now, we don't know if it'll turn out to be as good as them, but there is certainly quite a lot of potential. I mean, the novel is already an award-winning bestseller in Japan, and since multiple seasons by A1 Pictures have already been announced, the foundation for it to do well has already been made. The only thing left to see now is how well the story is adapted. So, with all that said, what exactly is the story of 86 about then? Well, the first thing to know is that it draws a lot of inspiration from the events of World War II. If you acknowledge this right from the get-go, then the entire scope of the conflict becomes a whole lot easier to understand. You'll start to see quite a few parallels the more we delve into it. Now, without getting into any spoilers, the world of 86 focuses on one primary conflict, a massive war between two nations that has raged on for 9 long years now. On one side we have the technologically superior Giadian Empire, the other is the monarchical-turned-democratic Republic of San Magnolia. While these two neighboring countries did once upon a time coexist in peace, that all changed when the Empire declared war and began to attack every single country on their border, seemingly in an attempt to take over the continent. The reason they could was because the Empire had developed an overwhelming military power known as Legion, an unmanned army of self-replicating drones capable of fighting all their battles without the possibility of a single casualty. It was an opponent that no nation could possibly hope to defend against, at least not without drones of their own. So when the Republic became faced by what was pretty much an infinite Zerg rush, all it took was about a month for their own military to get absolutely annihilated, forcing the government to have to make 2 executive orders. The first was to evacuate all the citizens to behind the fortified walls that protect its 85 territories. The second was the initiation of a special wartime law, a law that revoked the citizenship of any person who wasn't a pure Republic national. This second order was a pretty big deal because, remember, the Republic was once this monarchy ruled by nobles. It was only after a democratic revolution that the nation started to become more diverse with immigrants of different ethnicity, the result of which was a split in population between the pureblood Albas and the multinational Colorado. So, shortly after the war had started, every Colorado was declared an enemy to the Republic and stripped of their citizenship. They were then exiled to the front lines and forced to live in the last remaining outpost between the Republic and the Empire. This is the area known as 86. It's the unofficial 86th district outside the fortified barriers where the Colorado are persecuted. At first, there was a small number of Alba that protested this inhumane treatment of their fellow citizens, but whatever minimal support the Colorado initially had eventually dwindled away after the government manipulated their image and turned them into scapegoats. You see, by blaming the Colorado as the reason for their humiliating defeat, many Alba found it easier to accept their current situation. They now had something to aim their pent-up resentment towards. It was the core factor in strengthening any sort of discrimination that already existed against them. So, with the majority of the public now turning the blind eye, the Colorado were now this group of people the government could easily exploit, especially when they declared that they'd been able to create their own autonomous drones. It was after years of research into technology of their own that the Republic was finally able to announce the establishment of their own unmanned army. Autonomous mechs directed remotely by these so-called handlers safe within the Republic. The idea was to make the public believe that the war was now fought solely between machines. But the truth of the matter was that these drones were actually nothing more than mech suits piloted by the persecuted population of 86. The people who had been stripped of their basic humanity were now forced to fight for a country that didn't even see them as human. That's pretty much how this world came to be. So that was a very basic summary of what to expect going into episode 1. As for what to expect beyond that though, well, it's a story that revolves around our 2 main characters, Shin and Lena. Shin is the field commander of an elite group of 86ers who have survived numerous battles against the Empire. Lena, on the other hand, is their handler. a pureblood noble of the Republic who oversees the actions of Shin and his squadron. I can't really say too much about what happens between them and their relationship, but what I can say is that they both have quite a bit of depth to them. The way the novel portrays both their intertwining stories is said to be one of the best aspects of 86 as a whole. So you can expect to learn a lot about both of them as they go through more and more battles together. The main overarching story, though, is more so Lena's development into this person who becomes compassionate for the 86ers. She becomes more sympathetic to their struggles through each subsequent mission with them, all while coming across these hints that lead towards the truth behind this so-called war without casualties. As for Shin, well, his story is best to remain a mystery. So, with that being a general overview of 86 itself, we can now take a brief look at what to expect in terms of production. As I mentioned earlier, the studio in charge of animation is A1 Pictures, which if you've ever seen any of their numerous fights from the new Sword Art Online, then you'd know that we're definitely in for a treat when it comes to the combat. As for the director, well, this is actually his first time overseeing an entire anime. In the past, he's only ever been a director for specific episodes in series like Erased or Fate Grand Order. So there's not much to say in terms of his past experience when it comes to directing an anime from start to finish. When it comes to series composition though, we have the same person who did both seasons of Promised Neverland, which after season 2 could honestly either be a good thing or a bad thing. Even so, I really don't think that pacing will turn out to be that much of an issue. Considering they've already confirmed 2 seasons, that's at least 24 episodes for what's at most 8 volumes of the novels. So it's probably gonna end up being 3 to 4 volumes per season, which for context is a similar pace to what ReZero went at. Now, even if all of that does somehow still turn out to be garbage, at the very least you can expect a banger of a soundtrack from Hiroyuki Sawano. Seeing that he was partially in charge of the score was actually one of the main reasons why I decided to look into this series in the first place. Pretty much any anime that he's a part of is almost always a must-watch, at least for me. So there's definitely a lot of potential for this anime, but what I think will ultimately determine this series' success is the way it decides to portray its heavier elements. What I mean is that it's not supposed to be a lighthearted shonen battle fantasy. It's a gritty war drama that excels in the realistic way its characters are shown to live in this world of conflict. If the anime is going to do well, then it has to be able to show exactly what's at stake whenever these 86ers step onto the battlefield. If it doesn't, then the anime will just end up losing a lot of what the novels did so well to capture. But anyway, I don't think much more really needs to be said about this. If you're a fan of Code Geass, Attack on Titan, or any solid military anime with mechs at the forefront, then I definitely think 86 is worth giving some of your time to. We've finally been given a promising new entry into a genre that I personally feel has been rather stale lately. So even if it isn't a top-tier mecha anime like the others that came before it, I'll probably end up watching all of it anyway just because of how much I like the themes. Plus I gotta hear the entire soundtrack. But yeah, that's one of my recommendations to you this season. So if you think it's something you're gonna like, then be sure to let me know in the comments. Now, as always, thank you so much for watching, and if you enjoyed this type of anime content, then you already know what to do. So until next time, ciao.